So the time is about 8:30 and I'm here at the first sacred space. It's in the roundabout woodlands and we're at the Midge seat. I don't know if you can see behind, where the Valley of Midges on that side meets the Sacred Valley, and it's part of the To the Ends of the Earth project to round that off. And I'm also talking about the rounding off the 5-year plan at the same time. And here I want to talk a little bit, very briefly, about one of the 5 pillars of this 5-year plan, and that was tackling pill dependency and the fact that I'm on sertraline hydrochloride. Pill dependency was the first thing that we looked at in the 5-year plan, and we tried twice, once during the end of 2010 and once during 2011, to come off sertraline, and both times we found that we still had the anxiety symptoms, so we came back on them. Now, I suppose you could say that if this is very deep rooted, that's still psychosomatic, because I knew that I was coming off the pills. However, later on, I think it was the summer of 2013, I had neuralgia, and I was given a drug to help the neuralgia, and the side effects of the drug was that it cancelled out the workings of sertraline. I didn't know that when I was taking it, and yet the anxiety symptoms came back, and I actually went to the doctor about it, and I discovered that he was that the drug that he prescribed was actually a cancellation. It mixed with a sertraline. Now, there's no way that I could have known that, and so the return of the symptoms there really let me know that this is not a psychosomatic issue. It is a real issue, and that the drugs really work. Do you know, there has been no huge side effects of me being on it now for over a decade. The doctors don't seem to be dreadfully concerned that I'm still on it, despite the fact that I have a yearly sort of check-up for it. I think that although it's been a failure in terms of not being able to come off the drugs, it's actually a success, because we know now, beyond all measure of a doubt, that these drugs work and that they're tackling something that's real, rather than just psychosomatic, and that we're permitted to stay on these drugs, for as long as we want. So, this is not a total failure in terms of the 5-year plan. So here I am at a sort of sub-sacred place, so to speak, and this is sitting on my veranda, actually, at the allotment. And it's funny because today is exactly 2 years since we acquired this allotment, and we'd been on the waiting list for several years before then. I do have a funny feeling that in total this has been something that largely started again around the time of the 5-year plan's sort of inception, if you like. And now here we are, having done very well in the last 2 years. We've had 3 growing seasons, but only 2 years, because the first year we got here, we were halfway through a growing season, and it was inherited. And then last year we had our first full growing season, which was actually our second. And of course this year now we're halfway through our third, but it's been 2 complete years. There are many little projects that I've done throughout this 5-year plan, which were not necessarily exactly included in the plan, but have worked very well to make things a lot happier. this, for example, is one of the good things, because I spend a lot of time with my mother working down here on the allotment, and so it's a nice thing. It's a nice way for us to spend time together on a purpose as well. Of course, the main project that I've been doing in the past 5 years, apart from To the Ends of the Earth, obviously, is my birds and breeding birds. Something which I started in the summer, that I launched the 5-year programme, and I never thought that I would end up with an aviary, or end up actually sort of rearing baby birds, if you like. I started with cages and budgies and just keeping birds as a token to remind me of intrinsic value, and then in 2010 it was suggested to me by a friend that I breed my finches. So I started breeding them in cages, and it was very successful. And obviously we've had losses along the way, but when I moved into my new home, we were able to build an aviary. Again, I was given money to do that. I couldn't afford to build an aviary myself, but it was given to me in order to build this aviary. And you know, I won't always have an aviary, because it's different from what I imagined it to be. But it is a lot of fun in the summer, a lot of fun across the summer months, and rearing baby birds is lovely because you get to see them grow. You know, they come out all ugly and dependent on their parents, and you watch the parents feed them and their crops fill, and then their little eyes open after a week, and then after 2 weeks they've got sort of like pin feathers and they're beginning to sort of look more like birds, and then after 3 weeks they're learning to perch and they've started to sort of flutter a bit, and by about a month they're fledging, they're flying for themselves, and they're eating for themselves, and then by 5 weeks they've started to molt and their true colours show, and you know if they're male or female, and you can give them names accordingly. And then 6 weeks they're totally independent, and you can, if you want to, give them away or you know, sell them or whatever. You know, and there's something in that. There's something in watching sort of new life appear and then grow, and that's something that is shared between the aviary and this place, where you see, you know, the plants, you plant them as seeds and you see them grow. It's about the miracle of life, watching things grow, and also then harvesting from that, or getting enjoyment out of, you know, what it produces. So that has gone a long way to helping me be more happy, getting me from, I think the phrase was, getting me from where I am now to where I want to be. So it's just gone noon, and rather than wait and tell you this in sacred places in Knaresborough, like the Throne and Father's Cave, I'm doing it in Conyngham, because those other places are quite public and the ability to film there almost not possible. So whilst I'm on my way there, I'm passing through Conyngham, I thought that I would talk to you, and I want to cover one of the main strands of the 5-year plan, and that was to move. And this strand is totally satisfied by our move to Markenfield. Do you know, that move was a lot of work in coming. It was the strand that we tackled of the 5-year plan after the sort of at that point, failure, I suppose, of the pill dependency. And we started by looking at part by part rent, and we couldn't do that financially speaking, although we did everything we could to make that possible. And by the start of the middle of 2011, I was looking just for other places to rent. And that's when we fell across Markinfield, and we went through several issues. We changed mortgages 3 times. First time was a really good rate, and then we discovered that we weren't eligible for it. The second time we got all the way to the banks for Nationwide to reject us on a guarantor mortgage, and the final time we thought we had lost it originally, but it turned out to be just a cock-up with our financial advisors, and we ended up with NatWest and a house. Of course, getting onto the property ladder was something I couldn't do alone. I could, in fact, afford the mortgage repayments, no problem, because they were in fact less, and are in a lot of cases are less than the amount you are expected to pay rent. The problem is, if you're paying an extortionate amount of rent, how do you manage to save for the initial deposit? And it's the initial deposit that you need in order to secure a mortgage, in order to get a house. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you don't own the house at all, the bank owns the house. Well, actually, having rented, I can tell the difference, because when I rented, I paid money to my landlord, and my landlord owned the house. He told me what I could and couldn't do, he could come round at any moment, he dictated everything. And no matter how much I paid the landlord, I never got to own the house. Now, that is not the case with the banks. The banks do not own, they part own at best, and so long as you keep paying them, your share of the house in its entirety increases, and their share decreases until eventually you own it outright, and the banks are completely paid off. It's a sort of controlled debt. It's not like an overdraft. It's a controlled debt where you are borrowing money and you pay it back, and you don't borrow the money unless you can pay it back, and they won't give you the money unless you can pay it back. Obviously, things can go wrong and you can lose houses and stuff like that. But this was a way of allowing me to get on the market, and of course I did not have the money for the initial deposit. Thankfully for me, my parents, even with 3 children, have saved up for this moment for many, many years. And what gets me is that each time we had to change the mortgage, that initial deposit had to go up in order to secure the next one. And they went with it. They went with it all the way. And of course that allows me the freedom to do whatever I want with the house. If I want to paint it, I can. You know, it's mine, effectively. It allowed me the space to have an aviary, which I had always wanted, even though the money for that was not around either. And my nan gave me the money for that. You know, I'm not a proud man. Well, I am, but there are some things on my wage that I just cannot do, and I am terribly grateful to all those people who would give me money, you know, whether it's the banks that trust I can pay it back, whether it's my parents who are going to pay the initial deposit for me so that it can all be possible, or whether it's my nan who, you know, gives me less than £1,000, but enough to build an aviary and give me years and years of happiness. These things shouldn't be overlooked, and it's not just me that's made this strand of the 5-year project a success. It's my entire family and their support, and I'm pleased to say that I hope I stay and enjoy Markhamfield for many, many years more, and even if I eventually move, when I eventually move, it will no doubt be to somewhere else on the property ladder. I don't have to go back to eternal renting, wasting my money on a dead end at such a high cost. I have no way of ever getting out of it.